And we're live and welcome everybody. Good evening and welcome to tonight's program. For those of you who are asking if you're in, you're in. Here we are, we're live. And welcome to the 6th Annual National Day of Racial Healing event featuring Jon Kabat-Zinn and Vivian Williams-Kurutz. I'm Robin Call and the host of Reading with Robin. What I love to do is connect authors and readers, and I've been doing it for almost 20 years. And why am I here? How am I connected? I am. It's a connection, most definitely. I've been hosting for all of these years, and for the last several have really been prioritizing BIPOC authors on my various platforms. The publishing industry is stepping up and publishing more books, and I'm bringing them to you. Fiction is a way to start conversation, to garner empathy, and I'm always happy to recommend a good book, so feel free to reach out. And now I'm going to introduce our wonderful conversationalist. First up, Vivian Williams-Kurutz, my new friend, is founder and executive director of Harlem Wellness Center. She's a health activist, community organizer, speaker, workshop facilitator, yoga meditation teacher, and writer. Through promotion, education, and engagement in accessible wellness programs, Vivian is committed to work at the intersection of racial health and environmental justice. Through this work and role as a local business owner, she is committed to contributing to the vibrancy and health of her community. Harlem Wellness Center's Racial Healing Hub is a public-facing program designed to change the way our communities talk about race and promote truth, reconciliation, and transformation. The Racial Healing Hub harnesses the power of conversation, storytelling, art, reflection, call to action to move us toward compassion, empathy, and care for one another. And my other new friend, Jon, we're just like old friends already. Jon Kabat-Zinn, a PhD, did his doctoral work in molecular biology at MIT and is professor of medicine emeritus at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, where he founded the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society, and its world-renowned mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR clinic. He's the author of 14 books, including the bestsellers, Full Catastrophe Living, Wherever You Go, There You Are, and Mindfulness for Beginners. His four latest books are a series updating and expanding the 2005 edition of Coming to Our Senses, Meditation is Not What You Think, Falling Awake, The Healing Power of Mindfulness, and Mindfulness for All. His books are published in over 45 languages. His work has contributed to a growing movement of mindfulness into mainstream institutions such as medicine, psychology, healthcare, neuroscience, schools, higher education, business, social justice, criminal justice, prisons, the law, technology, government, and professional sports. Over 700 hospitals and medical centers around the world now offer MBSR. Jon lectures and leads mindfulness workshops and retreats around the world and right here with us on Crowdcast. I'm going to disable the chat and Q&A for just a little while. When it's the appropriate time, Jon will be leading us in meditation, and I want to thank everybody for their generosity. Proceeds from tonight's event will go to the Harlem Wellness Center and Fair Fight. We really appreciate everybody's kind words and excitement for this event, and I'm going to turn the program over to Vivian and Jon, but I'll be back. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Robin. Hello there, Jon. We made it.
So sweet. So sweet to be together like this.
Yes.
Too bad it can't be in person, in a real, analog setting, but the digital will have to do.
It's going to do great. I just wanted to start off with giving a little context about how we got here.
Please, absolutely.
Yes. It started off with Robin. Her friend Liz Paley introduced us, and Liz invited her to help the Harlem Wellness Center raise money for Giving Tuesday by allowing us to tell our story and to share about our work on her reading with Robin Crowdcast. And she invited me to choose an author to speak to. And as I was reflecting on it, the only person that kept coming to my mind was you. I was saying, I want to be in conversation with Jon. And I reached out to Omega because you and I have connections with Omega Institutes. So for those of you who don't know Omega, it's been started in 1977, and it is a holistic studies retreat center with workshops and conferences and programs to awaken the best of the human spirit. And you've been long affiliated with Omega, correct?
Very true. Yeah.
Yes.
Long time.
And so
it is a truly wonderful place and a real resource for people who want to find other people who are also interested in transforming their lives and discovering true well-being.
Well, fortunately, in 2019, Omega hosted an event with you and Robin McGee in New York City called the Inner Work of Racial Justice. And Harlem Wellness Center was invited to co-sponsor that event, and that is where we got a chance to connect. Right. And when I was at that event, lights went on for me because that was the work that I was doing. So to be part of it and to have it named and to be immersed in it through your path, it really felt like coming home to the work that really deeply and authentically resonated me. So I want to thank
deeply
you
touched to hear that, and I was at the time, and to discover the person who founded what to my ears was music, namely the Harlem Wellness Center, where you teach mindful hatha yoga and mindfulness. I mean, given that I grew up in Washington Heights and so have a kind of intimate relationship with Manhattan and Harlem, that it's just music to my ears to hear that what you were doing, and the impulse arose to sort of just find out more.
Well, your work has informed what I do so much, and it's inspired me, and so it's really an honor that you said yes to today. And so I'd love to start off by just asking you, what made you say yes to this conversation?
I feel like meeting you was a kind of, and having lunch during that day-long intensive that we ran after the talk at the 92nd Street Y was really such a pleasure that when you proposed this, I felt like, well, of course, because I feel like we're in a period where the body politic is being, sort of torn apart. And everybody nowadays is talking about whether our democracy is even going to survive. And a lot of this is being driven by the fact that we're probably in the very last decade where white people will be in the majority population-wise in the United States. And the racism has been baked into our system, not since 1776 or 1787, but since 1619, as the 1619 Project, demonstrates. And so we really do need to seize hold of what's deepest and best in our capacity as human beings within this very fragile democracy that never was a democracy for people of color, and who were brought over, of course, as human beings, enslaved to drive the economic engines of, primarily the South and cotton and tobacco. And we've never really acknowledged this history in an authentic way, never mind trying to right some of the long-standing intergenerational wounds and costs of that inequality from the very beginning of our country, even before. So anything that I can do to put my shoulder to the wheel as one more person, and where the subject matter of liberation, true liberation, is of course at the very root of yoga and meditation. These are often spoken of as liberative practices. And so what we even understand as being the gift of being human is a kind of amenable to an interior work that we have to do on ourselves, but within the context of an exterior world and its constructs and governing that actually can be so imprisoning that even if you're inwardly liberated, outwardly you're oppressed. And I don't think that the country or the world at this particular point in history can tolerate it any longer. We have too many serious problems that are all coming to a head at this very one moment in history. And so I think it's a moment where the planet's either going to wake up or the human species is going to go through some, sort of major declines that may put an end to it. The planet will still go around the sun, but what happens to us and our children and grandchildren and future generations really depends on us recognizing the deep nature of our own humanity and our hearts and minds. And those are, if you will, muscles that could be exercised. So one of the reasons that I wanted to have this conversation with you is that we both understand in some sense what it takes to exercise the muscle, and to not create some kind of romantic fairy tale about liberation or freedom from oppression. This is extremely hard work, the discipline of meditation or of yoga. And then we're not doing it for ourselves in a certain way, even though it sometimes looks as if, and it could become narcissistic or very self-centered, but actually the liberative element of it is exactly the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about this time as you've described it, and just seeing us in this portal and where we are not where we were and we're not to something new yet. And there's a pull to keep the status quo, and then there's this push for something new and to reimagine and to recreate and to usher in this new paradigm. And so in this whole mixture here, I feel like that is what we're experiencing. And I was wondering if you said that the Renaissance is here. Is that what you mean?
When I say that, I like to, it's kind of like guerrilla theater. If I say it, it may be more true. So in some way, it's a poetic assertion that really the Renaissance, whatever we might mean by that, of like, say, true equality, transcending racial bias, including implicit racial bias, transcending the dualisms of the that come out of the income inequality and wealth inequality. These are human constructs of the human mind, and they've been around for centuries, for thousands of years. But the human beings as a species are really in our infancy compared to, say, the age of the earth, never mind the age of the universe. And so the real challenge is, are we going to make it through this transition period to be able to live in peace and let the full dimensionality of our humanity flourish for every single human being, and not just the privileged few or the people who are, sort of have managed historically to dominate everybody else on the planet, whatever portion of the planet you're speaking about. So it's a matter of actually making real what the framers of the Constitution and especially the Declaration of Independence said. All men are created equal. They didn't include women. They certainly didn't include Black people who were enslaved, as we said. But in principle, if that's even, remotely possible in terms of truth, then we have to do the hard work of making sure that that happens, and working against the forces of voter suppression that are kind of, in some sense, the death throes of this transition from white domination and wealth domination to, the way I put it is, all of the cells of the body politic getting an adequate blood supply. And if you think of human beings as the components, the cellular basis of the body politic, whether we're talking about the United States or planet Earth, then in order for us to contribute to the well-being of the nation or the planet, we ourselves have to have enough blood supply, to function optimally. And so if the heart and the liver, I like to say, went to war with each other over not liking each other's looks or the shape of each other's cells and so forth, and the heart says, well, I'm the most important organ in the body because I pump all the blood, and I don't like the looks of you, so you're not going to get an adequate blood supply. How long do you think the organism would last if the heart and the liver went to war, or with the nervous system or anything like that? So in our bodies, every one of our cells gets adequate nurturance in order to live its function fully, to serve the whole. And if you look inside the body, you'll not find your name on any of the trillions of cells in your body. So you won't find the me that we're so protective of, and that we're so frightened other people are going to take away what I have, but we don't even investigate, who am I? Which is the fundamental liberative inquiry, so to speak, in meditation practice and yoga practices. Who's meditating? Who's practicing yoga? Who's breathing? Who's even thinking or capable of speaking as we're doing? So these are profoundly liberative practices, at least potentially, that could contribute to transforming the body politic. And so that's what I mean when I say the Renaissance is already here. Look how many people are practicing meditation and yoga. It's far more people than have ever been doing that on the planet. And meditation is now a part of mainstream medicine, and that would have been considered laughable or absurd 50 years ago. And now, we even recognize the words sound the same because they're linked at the hip etymologically. So this is a moment that is pregnant with possibility. And the more you watch television, the more you think we're on the brink of complete collapse and loss of democracy and tyranny. And there's no question that we're on that brink. And it's up to all of us, not a few saviors, to come along and make it all better, because that's not going to, be a lasting healing kind of outcome to the problem that the human mind presents when it doesn't know itself, and that the human heart presents when it doesn't know itself. And so meditation and yoga are the microscope, so to speak, or the telescope for investigating the nature of the self, beyond skin color, beyond, nation of origin or anything like that.
Wow. As you're speaking, I'm thinking about all of the people who are on this call right now, where they could be anywhere, but they actually chose to engage in this conversation. And that's why we really wanted to be here, because this is a conversation. Hi, welcome.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you wherever you are,
Yes, it's a conversation that makes people frightened. People are in their fight, flight, their amygdala. People, there causes fights, and there's a lot of bullying or shaming and guilting. And so I really found that my entry point into the mindfulness-based approach was because I don't see that changes anything, because minds are not open and hearts are not open through those methods. And so that people have the courage to come here and to be in this space to hear this conversation means a lot to me, because one of the things that we're doing in Harlem Wellness Center Racial Healing Hub is we want to keep the conversation going. And as you can see, even with what's happening in a lot of mainstream circles right now, it's trying to squash the conversation that was started in 2022 at an amplified level and try to dampen it. And so we want to keep this conversation out there. And it makes me think, okay, so how did you, as a white man in your generation, come to be able to say the things that you were able to just say? What was your pathway to that?
Well, as I said, I think the night that we met, it took me about 75 years to realize how privileged I am and have been just by virtue of my birth and my parents and all sorts of things, including my skin. But I didn't realize that until I was in my late 70s. I thought it was all like my doing, so to speak, that, yeah, I was like, I worked hard and I made this all happen. But I didn't really grasp that the glide path for me was in many ways extremely privileged, just by virtue of my family, my education, what my parents cared about, the schools that I went to and so forth, and the obstacles that I didn't have to face to get an education, for instance. And then I also had the privilege of spending a year when I was 15 years old in France, in Paris, France. And I realized, holy cow, there's a whole other way of living than in Washington Heights in New York City, because Paris, France is not Washington Heights in New York City. And so I began to see that, the New York way of life wasn't the only way of life, but when you have the beauty of New York at its best, and you have the beauty of other ways at best, then you're larger as a person, and you benefit from that. So to me, it kind of woke me up to there being no boundary to what we're capable of when we actually recognize our own interior beauty and potential. And now I'm speaking like that. In my experience, that's true for every single person. Their beauty is not necessarily recognized outwardly nor inwardly by themselves. But that's why, when we started talking, we realized that, well, but we both love this kind of intentional, disciplined way of dropping beneath the surface of things and experiencing the actuality of, say, being embodied, no matter what the color of your skin is, and recognizing the beauty of embodiment and the miracle of it, and the fact that we have a mind that can actually discern this from that, and we can speak, which is another whole miracle, is how do we even think and speak? And so to me, this is kind of like a love affair with what might be possible. And what we need is, in some sense, a rotation in consciousness. Because I went to MIT, I coined a big word for it. I call it an orthogonal rotation in consciousness. But everybody's had this kind of experience where something happens and you have a realization and you feel like you're entirely different in the next moment because you've had this realization, and yet you're the same old person you always were. So that's, in some sense, you've rotated in consciousness and everything's the same as it was the moment before, but nothing's the same because you've gotten in touch with a whole other dimension of reality, of possibility, new angles on old problems and so forth, and therefore admitting to potential new solutions. So that's what comes out of the meditation practice and the yoga practice, is a deep inquiry into what is possible between birth and death if we engage the body and we engage the mind and we engage the heart and we engage each other in social, political relationships to optimize well-being, whatever that might be. And I don't mean in some kind of narcissistic way so that you do yoga so you can fit into a leotard or a bathing suit, to look a certain way. But I mean the deep understanding of what yoga would be. And the same with meditation, not trying to be a relaxed person. The beauty of meditation is it's so radical because it's not trying to get anywhere else. It's actually an invitation to realize where you already are and who you already are in your fullness, as opposed to an improvement agenda that, I'm going to get into shape or I'm going to be a better person. You can't be a better person than who you already are, but you could recognize your own interior beauty and how profound that is. And so that's what I teach, and I know that's what you teach as well. And one of the things that I was inspired about is like that you founded this Harlem Wellness Center. How did you even do that? What was your life trajectory that brought you to say, look, this might really be a liberative contribution, I'm guessing, to your community?
Mm-hmm.
Can you say a few words?
I can. I say that, yoga was chasing me my whole life. When I started watching Lilius Folan on PBS at 10. And it just captured my imagination. Totally forgot about it. Fast forward 10 years later, I'm in college and I'm in a theater troupe and we're doing, sun salutations and yoga as warm-ups, and this thing inside me just like lights up and I'm thinking, oh, it's that thing again. That really resonates with me. Forgot about it. Fast forward 10 years later or so, I'm at a dance class. I'm waiting in the lobby at a dance studio in 1991, and there's a tiny little studio in the corner because this was before the yoga boom. And there were 3 people in the class, including the teacher. And that is where I would just stare before my class because something was calling me. And what I know, it was really like my path was calling me because it was through then me leaving my tap dance class and going into that yoga class and going on that pursuit and going on my first yoga retreat, which was an immersion and so powerful to have this combination of meditation and yoga and whole foods and nature, something that you would experience at Omega, right? That intensive is really transformative. And it was for me. And then I wanted to figure out how could I really build this into my life, not just at a retreat, but on an everyday level. And in doing so, my community just started reaching out to me and calling me in and asking me to share with them. And coming from a family that's very similar to a lot of African-American families that are dealing with, social determinants of health and hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, all of these things. And knowing that this was something that I was going to have to pay attention to if I didn't want the same results of what I was witnessing, I, really tried to take it on. And anytime something's good, you want to share it. At least I do. And so it became about sharing it. And so I really got into basically health justice, so to speak. And I never considered myself an activist. That word never resonated with me because I had in my mind an idea of what activism meant and the model of what it looked like, and it didn't feel authentic to me. And I think that there's a role, and I think that the way to liberation is there's as many ways as there are individuals. And so for me, what I realized was I personally couldn't I can feel the rage and I can feel the anger and I can feel the grief of oppression and discrimination and watching people not be able to thrive and have their potential and watching the fallout of so many hundreds of years that are still showing up today. That can give me a lot of grief and anger. What I do know is that for my own health and well-being and the life that I want to live is that I don't want to be angry. I can feel that cortisol running through my body. I can feel that the rage and the anger is going to make me sick. And so the mindfulness approach really resonated with me because it's a way to have a conversation and to share stories and to where people are not on guard and necessarily, thinking that they're being attacked or anything else. And so that you can start to try to get that human connection, because if you can get that human connection, then you can find that compassion, which can lead to empathy, which can lead to, I want to help relieve your suffering. And I'll finally say that, at the beginning, when we said, the racial healing hub, to use the word healing, I was self-conscious about that. I thought, that's like a big thing to say that, oh, mindfulness is going to heal racism. So I love the way that you frame it in your work. And that has been something that's been empowering to me, in the way that you make the connection between the mindfulness practice and how it impacts the individual and goes out into the world.
Wow. I'm very touched and inspired to hear a little bit about your trajectory and your vision and how it's manifesting itself. And in a sense, that really is a kind of activism, in the sense that, what does that mean, activism? I mean, you're changing the world by sharing what you love. And it's infectious. We're in a time of COVID and we're not out of COVID, and Omicron is happening. And, we don't know exactly how to relate to all of this. And it spreads exponentially. But what's also spreading exponentially, it seems to me, is this interest in mindfulness and interest in yoga. And it's like a positive meme. It is infectious, because when you find out that you can be centered and at home in your own skin, no matter where you are, even under very challenging circumstances, and not lose your mind when you most need to not lose your mind, that is a love affair with what it really means to be human. And and being human, any of us are capable of that we have this sovereignty, that we have this wholeness, that WHOLENESS, that is, as you're pointing out, absolutely the foundation of health and well-being. It's healing. The word healing has at its root the word whole, WHOLE. And it's the same as the word health and the word holy, for that matter. So there's sort of a sacred ground that we're on when we drop in on human awareness embodied. And that's really where the meditation practice is so useful, because it's not about, as I was saying before, getting anywhere else. It's about being where you actually are. So, and every human being has the capacity for awareness. We don't have to get it. We have it, but we've never been taught, even in kindergarten. Now kids are being taught in kindergarten how to actually make use of your awareness and how to cultivate access to it. It's the access that's problematic, because we think all the time that everything's about thinking, but awareness is an independent intelligence that doesn't really depend on thought. And thought, in some sense, can get in the way unless you have some simple instructions for how to work with thought. And so the most misunderstood thing about meditation is that you're supposed to be a certain way, or you're supposed to make your mind go blank, or you're supposed to feel relaxed or anything. Whereas actually what mindfulness is about, you're supposed to feel exactly the way you're feeling. Now, can you just hold exactly the way you're feeling in awareness without judging it, without liking it or disliking it, or noticing if you are liking it or disliking it, noticing that too? And can you just be equanimous, where you're not being pulled away or seduced by either the attraction or repulsion? And that turns out, whether you're doing it in the body through yoga, or you're doing it in a sitting posture, or lying down in your bed, or whatever, that turns out to be the gateway to an entire universe that, as we started out speaking about, is liberative. So maybe we should take a few moments and a few minutes by the clock, not a lot of time, and just play with that now. What do you say? Do you think that would be
perfect?
So all of you out there, seeing if you can arrange yourself so that I'm assuming you got to be in front of your screen, although you can hear my voice without looking at the screen. And I invite you to shut your eyes if you want, but meditation wouldn't be all that useful if you had to always shut your eyes to be aware. So you can be aware with your eyes open, and just as easily as with your eyes closed. But whether you're with your eyes open or not, see if you can, if you're sitting, sit in a posture that embodies, right in this moment, that embodies wakefulness and dignity. And that also embodies, as long as we're at it, whatever energy it was that brought you to tune into this program in real time right now. There's some profound intention around it, behind it. So let's just drop in on the body in an erect and dignified posture, sitting and breathing. And can we feel, can we be aware of the sensation or the whole universe of sensations of the body sitting here breathing? So we're putting out the welcome mat for whatever's already here. We're not trying to establish any kind of ideal anything, including posture or attitude. But we're just taking a deep look, or maybe even a brief peek, at how it feels to just sit here or lie here and feel the breath moving in and out of your body. And if you will, ride on the waves of your breath as if you were surfing on the breath sensations where they're most vivid for you, perhaps down in the belly or in the chest or at the nostrils, or for that matter, a sense of the body as a whole sitting and breathing, or lying on your bed and breathing. If you know anything about yoga, the corpse pose is a wonderful pose, lying on your back, to engage the meditation practice in this way. And we're learning, of course, to fall awake rather than to fall asleep, which is always an occupational hazard of lying in the corpse pose. And so feeling the breath coming into the body, and feeling the breath leaving the body. And while we're focusing on the sensations associated with the breath, we're actually also learning to be aware and to rest in awareness, to take up residency, if you will, in awareness of your own body, sitting here breathing, lying here breathing. And the invitation is to follow my words to where they're pointing in your own experience. And then dropping underneath my words altogether, or letting go of them altogether. And just being in your own experience, moment by moment by moment, as we sit here. Using the breath sensations as an anchor to keep you in the present moment. Now, it won't take long before you notice that your mind has a life of its own, and it's going to go here and there and everywhere and not find the breath sensations in the belly or anywhere else in your body to be all that interesting. And this is where the loving kind of discipline comes in. And it is loving. It's a love affair. So when you notice that your mind is like not on your primary object of attention, which for now is the body sitting here breathing, then noticing what's on your mind. So that's interesting. Originally it was the breath, and now it's something else. Past, future, worry, anticipation, memory, image, movie. And when you notice what's on your mind, just let it be. Don't push it away. Don't pursue it. Just let it be and come back to your belly or to wherever the breath sensations are most vivid. And here you are again, resting in awareness, but tethered, if you will, to the body, to the breath sensations. But we're not primarily interested in the body sensations. We're just using them as a kind of anchor for our attention. What we're really experiencing is direct access to our own awareness and the capacity to take up residency here as if it was, your true home, rather than getting lost in thought all the time. You could default to awareness. And then you see when you're distracted by thoughts, the awareness will recognize that, especially if you exercise the muscle of mindfulness. And then you have a new opportunity to not get caught in the thought streams or in kind of anxious and, states of mind or depressive states of mind or self-critical states of mind. But just realize they're just thoughts. They're just like bubbles of, coming off the bottom of a pot of boiling water. And they come to the surface, they come out of someplace, and they come to the surface, and we can watch them just go poof as they reach the surface of awareness. And we can be at home in our body, in our mind, in our heart, in our own skin. And in this timeless moment we call now. And so you're at home in your own skin, in your own heart. And this can be virtually a 24/7 experience. I mean, just it could become your place of refuge, the ground of your being, rather than being, agitated or caught up in the turbulence of your own thoughts, fears, the uncertainties of the moment, which are huge. With COVID, with every other stress and source of emotional and physical pain in life, including often relationships with other people, fear, all of that stuff, we can hold it in a new way that is already liberative and deeply insightful, and can actually help us navigate to optimize our own circumstances and the conditions around us, to optimize them to maximize well-being and minimize harm, either harm we create ourselves or harm that is going on from other sources. And then, just as with physical hatha yoga, we work with the resistance that comes up, with the tightness, with the any kind of boundary that we find or that we fear. And then we learn to embrace it, not break through it or push through it, but to just embrace it in awareness and see what happens in the body and the mind and the heart when we do that, and nurture ourselves on a regular basis through formal practice. And then if your eyes have been closed, I invite you to open them, and I'll just say that the real meditation practice is not what I just guided you in. The real meditation practice is life itself. And what I just guided you in, you can actually carry into every moment of your waking life and keep coming back to it every time you get carried away by fear or anger or any thought stream or emotional reactivity. And then when we practice together, as we're doing in this way, even though because it's digital, we're all in our own homes, but there's some beauty in that because you're at home already. And the real meditation practice is just be at home anywhere, in any moment. And when the world is losing its mind or other people are losing their minds, that's no reason for you to lose your mind too. Because the well-being of the world and healing on any level requires us actually to come to terms with things as they are, which doesn't mean surrender to them or like them at all, but to come to terms with them means to actually see them as they are. And out of that comes transformation. It's not a fix. It's not fixing anything. We're making things be unbroken when they've been broken, but to recognize the unbrokenness of ourselves and each other in a certain way, and to let our compassion and our caring for other human beings shine forth, because they're really no different from ourselves. So that's a kind of tiny taste, if you will, of a guided meditation. And the only other thing I'll say is that the real meditation practice is how we live our lives from moment to moment to moment, and not how well we sit in the full lotus posture, or how far we can do a back bend, or, how long we can do sun salutations. So this is really adds another dimension to life, the awareness dimension. So yes, there's thinking and emotions, and as I was suggesting, we can get really caught up in our thoughts and emotions. And there's nothing wrong with thinking. I mean, it's an incredible form of intelligence, but it's much more intelligent when it's balanced out by awareness and emotional intelligence that allows us to recognize when our emotions are wholesome and helpful, and when they are seriously unwholesome and toxic and othering or based on fear or whatever reactions we wind up having to stressful circumstances, when what's really needed is a mindful response. And this has profound health benefits, which we won't go into, but my whole work and the work of thousands and thousands of colleagues around the world in mindfulness-based stress reduction is actually about just this, and what you were talking about before, that, we're catching people falling through the cracks of the healthcare system and challenging them to do something for themselves that no doctor or healthcare system can do for you, which is to take care of what you've got in a way that optimizes your own health and well-being. And just as you were describing earlier, Vivian, you just, realized that you had to do that for yourself, because no doctor or hospital is ever going to do it for you. And this is a very, very profound opportunity for healing. And then if we can heal on an individual level, why can't we heal on a body politic level too, on a societal level, on a global level, on a planetary level? And there's never been more of a challenge and need to heal on a planetary level, whether it's climate change or whether it's all the violence and despotism that's arising and in the world, that this is it for us. And as I like to say, it's all hands on deck. We need all hands on deck on Spaceship Earth, and we need all hands on deck to be in their own hearts and to not be driven by fear and othering.
Thank you so much for that. The other day when we were on a call having a little tech rehearsal, you led us in a meditation that was literally about 2 minutes. And I'm just always struck when I share meditation with other people or do it with you, how little, the little amount of time that it takes to really come back to the authentic and come to our core. As a woman of faith, and who has lived in spirit, as a tradition in my life, the thing that really blew me away about meditation is the science and the technology. Just how quickly the actual brain, the structure of the brain can change. What can happen with the amygdala, how it can shrink, and how become less activated, how we could have this technology, and I can see how it works in tandem with my faith and my spirituality that is led by wisdom teaching and the guidance that comes through that, because I could actually be where I can be inspired by wisdom teachings and I can be moved by it. However, if I have a neurological groove that's got me reacting in a certain way, the meditation is something that then can over time start to smooth out some of these grooves, right? And
exactly.
And start to work on us, work in another level. So I love that you talk about how there's, it's no catechism, it's not a belief system, because that is just what I've experienced, and just the power of it on a physiological way of how my body just feels right now, having practiced with you just now.
And another element of it, which is very hard to do on Zoom or on Crowdcast or whatever platform we're on digitally, when we're actually practicing together in the same room, there's also another dimension to it, which is that we recognize interconnectedness in an entirely new way. That's very powerful, that we're all equally human. And when you practice meditation with other people, actually tap into a dimension of common intentionality that's really profound, and it's palpable. People feel it. And this talk about activism, this also has potential activist applications, because there's nothing more powerful than a million people, say, sitting in absolute silence, fully awake, with full intentionality of purpose, say on the mall in front of the Capitol. That would be a very, very powerful statement without any words. And if coupled with the right words, it could be profoundly illuminating, not just moving, but people who put themselves on the line in full awareness to invite government to wake up to its responsibilities, for instance.
Let's
These
do it.
things are possible. I'm
Let's
waiting
do
for
it.
today.
Let's go.
Gandhi understood this big time, and so did Martin Luther King. And the time is now for us to actually not create some dualism of activism versus passivity or something like that, because
exactly.
the meditation practice is its own form of activism, because so much of the time we get depressed or we get anxious and we feel like we don't have any power. And as soon as you sit down, you realize, like, no power. Incredibly powerful. The miracle of being a human being. Just the mystery of the breath, the body breathing, because we're not doing the breathing, it's breathing itself. Otherwise, we'd die when we went to sleep. And when we breathe together, that's the literal meaning of conspiracy.
Yeah, that interconnectedness is so strong when we do it together. It just takes over. There's something larger than ourselves that takes place in that connection. And I think that, I guess that's part of the whole idea of meditation being a route to, non-harming. Because if we're actually doing that, like, to come out of that, and to when you actually feel connected to that which is larger than yourself, it's not the natural instinct.
You don't want to harm me, because there's no difference between self and other, no matter what the other looks like or the history of. That's a profoundly healing and transformative experience, but it's fairly rare. But when you start to practice meditation, and especially in large groups, that sort of arises naturally. I mean, a recognition of our humanity underneath name and form, as they tend to put it. And then the sort of self-centeredness starts to dissolve, and the sense of I, me, and mine as a kind of special case, and that needs protecting my privilege, whatever that privilege is, that falls away, because our hearts are recognized as beating together. It's Ubuntu. It's like, I can't exist without you existing. And this is like the sort of foundation of our core humanity. But we've drifted so much into the particularities of, sort of different classes and races and castes and stuff like that globally, that we have a great deal of healing to do to in some sense get back to this core unity of our humanity at a time when the planet is on fire, so to speak. And whether it's fire or whether it's ice, I mean, we're facing enormous chaotic changes in weather and global warming, of course. And so there's never been a better time for us to actually discover what it means to be fully human before we destroy ourselves or create dystopias that are so imprisoning and horrifying that nobody will want to be part of them. And so that notion of ahimsa that you mentioned, that was a profound part of Gandhi's movement, is like non-harming. I mean, to actually let non-harming, which is also the the foundation of the Hippocratic Oath in medicine, maybe we need a Hippocratic Oath for politics. First, do no harm. Hippocratic Oath for, education. First, do no harm. And what would that take? Well, what it would take would be mindfulness and heartfulness.
You're making
And it's right here. It's not like, we have to wait 30 years for it. It's right under our noses, but when all puns intended, but we have to actually wake up to it and realize who we think we are is such a small narrative compared to how actually beautiful we are as human beings, all of us, without exception.
Everything that you're talking about is really just like the core essence, right? The things that have just gotten muddied up. At one of our last Racial Healing Hub committee member meetings, we were talking about love. Whenever I hear Martin Luther King's quotes or bell hooks or your quote or John Lewis's quotes on love, it just melts me. Something in me shifts so powerfully and is so moved by those expressions. And we were talking about how love has become almost like it's taboo to talk about in, business and institutions and academia. It's not professional. It's not appropriate. And really, it's like that is the essence, like, right, it will cover the multitude and really be the broad stroke antidote, but it's really considered something that is inappropriate to talk about. So we were discussing, like, we've got to bring love back, because every time I would talk about love, I would feel like I had to kind of, explain it, because it felt so exposed.
Yeah.
To say.
Of course, that's the problem with words and why we need poetry in a certain way, because the love is kind of like we're pointing at something, but it's an interior experience that's very hard to actually put into words. And when we put into words, we actually sometimes denature it. But certainly Martin Luther King was, is an incredibly powerful exponent of that. I mean, I happen to have here, his famous, passage from his last address as president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And since yesterday was his birthday, and all sorts of people are actually quoting Martin Luther King out of context and always quoting the same thing, and very often, in the white community, it's the people who were like, fighting Martin Luther King every step of the way. But now that he's dead, they're quoting him, and, and Rosa Parks and everybody else. But it's like not authentic. But he said, we've got to get this thing right. What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice.
Can you read that again?
Implementing the demands of justice.
Please read that again.
Okay. We've got to get this thing right. There was a paragraph in front of it. It says, power properly understood is nothing but the ability to achieve purpose. Okay. So that's profound, but whose purpose? So there's where the power differential comes in, that the people who have the power, they have the purpose. Okay. It's their purpose that gets expressed. So he said, and one of the great problems of history is that the concepts of love and power have usually been contrasted as opposites, polar opposites, so that love is identified with a resignation of power and power with a denial of love. And then he says, we've got to get this thing right. What's needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive. There's no question about that. Mm-hmm. And love and it's built into our laws, okay? So that some people have power and other people do not have power, and it's by legally baked into the laws. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. Yeah, we can talk all we want about love, but it's not going to actually make anything happen that would look authentic to ameliorate suffering or recognize suffering even. So power at its best, he says, is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love.
Oh,
It's
yes.
precisely this collision of immoral power with powerless morality which constitutes the major crisis of our time. He said this in 1967. It's 2022 now, and we don't know if democracy is going to survive another 6 months. So when he says we got to get this thing straight, he's not kidding. And I think the reason you and I are in conversation is because we're suggesting that unless human beings understand what their own true self-interest is beyond the narrow self-interest of more wealth for me, more money for me, more power for me, and then what, you're going to die anyway and alienate all your children in the process because it's all about me, me, me. Or whether we're going to actually go from me to we and understand that just that Ubuntu, that I can't be without you. And that's true for all of us because biologically we're all the same. I mean, we're the human species on this planet and totally insignificant in the vastness of the universe. And we don't have a planet B either, as they say. This is it. So on every level, from Manhattan and New York City to, the United States, to the entire planet, whether it's the oceans or the forests or the deserts, we need to wake up. And that's what mindfulness is about. It's about waking up, and then waking up to interconnectedness, and therefore learning. We practice yoga, we practice meditation, and learn something about yourself, and that we're not as limited as we thought. We're not as anxious as we thought. We're not as caught by our anxiety as we thought, because we have a new perspective or even dimension to hold it all, namely awareness. And then from that learning, we grow. Okay, so you practice in this way, you grow as a human being. You grow beyond your likes and dislikes and your fear and your fear of other people and all of that kind of stuff. And you learn, you grow, you heal, which in my working definition is coming to terms with things as they are. It's not fixing, it's not curing, it's the recognizing things as they are, and then you come to terms with it. And then that coming to terms is so transformative that you actually become who you already were all the time anyway, but forgot. And that I would call a love affair with what is deepest and most beautiful in us as human beings. And that's why I practice, and that's why I teach, and that's why I have this profound optimism that even though our backs are against the wall, we human beings at root, and you mentioned your spiritual traditions and practice, we human beings at root are geniuses, miraculous beings who are capable of recognizing that our true self-interest is in each other's self-interest and well-being. Otherwise, the blood supply doesn't get distributed equally, and your leg will fall off, or your liver will die, or your lungs won't work, or what. No, we need the whole planet to have enough wealth, enough security, enough recognition for their humanity. That's what's, this is like almost a no-brainer. And yet we see so much harm in the society that we can't just sort of meditate and navel gaze, so to speak, and just be happy in our own little cubbyhole. Meanwhile, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. So that's where I think the doing and non-doing piece come together. And when the doing comes out of being, which is what we've been talking about, it's an entirely different doing. And when more and more and more people, until finally everybody drops in this way. That's the Renaissance. It's an ongoing project. It's always here, but it always also needs nurturance. And we're all nurturing it in ourselves, but we're also, I hope, nurturing it in each other.
True. I think that the whole interconnectedness is a great segue to bringing in some of the voices from the folks in the room, right? Thank you for that.
Let's do that.
I'd like to start by bringing in Jessica Morton. Jessica Morton is on the Racial Healing Hub, Harlem Wellness Center Racial Healing Hub Committee. And I'll just say that when I started this for the 5th Annual National Day of Racial Healing, I put out to the Harlem Wellness Center community, I put out a notice saying that I wanted to do something for the 5th Annual National Day of Racial Healing and who wanted to join me. And I show up at the first meeting, and it's myself, one other Black woman, and then 4 white people. So I was like, this is interesting. And I thought to myself, perfect. Because what I have come to hear and understand is that a lot of people of color are exhausted, are tired. And we need people who are in different spaces to be able to bring these conversations. And in the same way that you were able to express and share things in a way that are completely different than if I had said the same thing. It's important that these different voices are here. So it's like a really beautiful thing to have the labor shared and the burden shared. And so I will segue that into introducing Jessica Morton.
Vivian, I feel like I now have to skip sentences in my little intro here, but I'm really happy to be here with everybody. I'm Jess Morton, as Vivian said. I'm a member of the Harlem Wellness Center Racial Healing Hub team. If you've been to any of our other events, you've heard me say that over and over. Sorry. When Vivian first approached me about joining the committee, I literally thought I was going to be providing technical support. I never really thought about myself as someone who was working to create actionable ways to fight racism. I was more of a do the work internally kind of person, read the books, What I've realized is that I need to look into myself, but I also need to take this work out into the world. And some of that's on a small scale. It's the personal conversations with my friends, with my coworkers, with my family. But as a white person, to expect all the work for this change to be done, for this change and this healing to be done by those who are most hurt by racism's effects is, in and of itself, a part of my own brand of white supremacy. And I can opt out of doing this work because of my skin color. But the thing I never processed is I am being harmed by this too. And that's something we were never taught. I missed out on relationships because I was taught by society that I didn't need to seek out those who had different life experiences than me. I missed out on a world where I could learn from people who could bring ideas to the table that I had never thought of. I missed out on challenging myself more because the country I grew up in and am still in had written off certain groups in such a way that I didn't have to work as hard for what I had. And that's not the world I want to live in. And seeing these things more clearly has made me realize that in a very different way, this fight is my fight too. Because to rephrase Ubuntu, I can't fully be who I am until everybody else can be who they are. So that's enough of an intro from me. I want to thank all of you for being here. And I would love to move to our first question, which is from Larry Burkett. I was just thinking how my practice allows me to take ownership of my emotions and experiences, anger, guilt, disappointment, shame, And this sometimes gives me back my sense of agency that allows me to take skillful action. Could either of you speak to this?
I think it's funny because the first thing that came up for me is that of yes, yes. And I think the thing that I'm dealing with is that though I have the practice and though this is an experience that I have of those times when I am not grounded, when I react in a way that I'm not proud of. And I think to myself, like, oh, well, what happened to didn't that neurological group get smoothed over? What happened? But or I hadn't, really been grounded in myself or centered. But yeah, I definitely see that, like, for my practice, the clarity of what is happening for me, of just like being able to just see it as if it's just laid out. And for me, it actually takes it outside of me, because when I'm carrying that, it feels like it's intertwined in me. But then the practice helps to kind of disentangle it so that I can see it as if it's on a palette and observe it, and then be able to learn from it and grow from it and from there.
So rather than having both of us answer the same question, why don't we move on to another question?
Sounds good. Our next question is from Martha Eddy. Martha, forgive me, I'm going to do about half of this. Can we talk about interconnectedness across divides? What helps us use our mindful state to speak out with people who have differences of opinion, belief, and action that we don't value? Oh, opinion, belief, and action that we don't value.
Well, that's the question, is it not, of the moment? And because we're always happy to talk to people who kind of agree with us or, are like us. And we have so much aversion very often to engaging people who live in a different reality, we might think, and just, very hard to connect with. So the first thing would be to be aware of your own aversion and your own projections onto the other people that have to be dehumanizing in a certain way. And we can justify them as much as we want, but they're still human beings. So the question is, there's some point of commonality. And this is now something that we're all engaging in families all the time, because people have different views and they're so strong that often you find like you can't talk to the other person, even though you love them. And so, there's no single answer to this question. And what I love about the meditation practice is that it really, rather than offering answers, it offers us encouragement to step in without knowing what's going to unfold next and see if you can't touch what is present in the moment. And very often it can be very disarming. Like if you just say something about yourself, for instance, and how you're feeling, rather than putting it all on the other person to change, then all of a sudden they can respond to your humanity. And there's the potential for actually dropping underneath all of the things that make us different and realizing that we're the same. I am not saying that that's easy to do, but you can do that with a look. You can do that just with the tilt of a head, conveying that you actually see the other person as a whole human being. And that's very hard to do when they're yelling at you, or when they're carrying an AR-15 and dressed in camo or whatever, because we're seeing those images so much on the screen. And it's not like you have to convince every person you run into who looks at the world differently from you. but your being actually is somewhat infectious. And when you're embodied, people are attracted to that. There's a certain element of mystery to it. And so you can maybe be disarming in a certain way with other people, with humor or with just a look that allows people to actually be more who they are without falling into their positions. And then there are some people that you just are never going to reach. And you work the odds, so to speak. We don't have to reach everybody on the planet. We only have to reach almost everybody.
I consider myself really blessed in that I do have so many relationships across what would be considered lines, these perceived lines or boundaries. And I think it's something that I reflect on when we talk about interdependence and interconnectedness. And I think I have trouble sometimes reconciling how many people go from cradle to grave without actually ever, having appeared to have a good life without ever interacting with anyone that was other or different. And so I sometimes wonder when I am sharing with people about the power of interconnectedness and that, I'm only as I am because you are, where maybe they've seen their grandparent or their parent or some family member never engage with anyone else and seemed to do fine before they left and transitioned. So I'm just kind of processing that, because that's just something that comes up for me, because I believe so much in the power of our interdependentness and our interconnection, and yet I see so many times where people don't experience it at all or get a chance to before they leave this planet.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like what healing versus curing. We cannot make people other than who they are. But we often want to. We want to fix them. We want to straighten them out so that they'll be more like us, think more like us, give up their deluded attachments and perspectives. Well, first we need to look at our own deluded attachments and perspectives and how much othering we engage in. And that's where the awareness comes in. As soon as you are in that place, and I wouldn't call it a state, by the way, I don't think of mindfulness as so much a state as a way of being in wise relationship to actuality, to all of actuality. And so there's no one way to do it. There's not some state that we're trying to attain. And if we were really good meditators, then we'd nail it every time. It's a moment-to-moment thing that involves just kind of trusting in emergence and experiencing life unfolding in the, as I said in the guided meditation, the only moment that we ever have, which is now. And it's a timeless moment. And so there's a certain way in which that itself can be profoundly disarming without trying to get anywhere or get a result. But just your willingness to be present is profoundly inspiring and disarming to many other people, because it reminds them that they could be present too. And that is a very, very kind of integrating experience, because you're at home wherever you go, no matter what's happening. And that is transformative and even intrinsically healing.
And I feel like us just being here tonight, if what we're doing at the simplest level is just a reminder that that interconnection is there, that love is, as you described it in Martin Luther King's quote, like that, like reminding and replenishing and filling the space with these ideas and these rather than void. So I just feel like that to myself. I'm just feeling that.
I lost your
contribution.
image, Vivian, while we're here. I don't know where you went.
Oh, did I? I'm right here. Just for me personally, just being reminded of all of this is filling my soul.
Well, do we have time for one more, or are we kind of on the verge of bringing this to a close? I wish I could. Oh, there. Okay.
I figured
I see.
I thought maybe you wanted me back.
Yeah, of course we want you back, but I want Vivian back. All I see
I
is some nice
know.
logo. What's that about?
It's
I'm not here.
It's a lovely logo of a beautiful heart, Vivian.
But you're not there. No, not your image of you.
You were
Where did
you
I
were popping
go?
in and out a little bit like Andorra. Oh, now that's
Your voice is here, but your image is not.
It must.
I just went off camera so that I could go back on camera, and now I don't know how to go back on camera. So that was a nice little trick I just tried.
I'm glad we can hear you.
Oh, there it is.
It says you're on
Okay.
screen. Huh. We have
Do you
your
have
heart.
me?
I think it's just
so
a
weird.
connectivity issue, bandwidth.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no.
I know.
I for one am disappointed because I really, sort of love seeing you on my screen. What can I say?
Yeah, I know.
And especially towards this closing things out, closing out our conversation. But if you, I know you're here. We can feel you.
And actually,
sure.
Larry's saying he can see her, so that's interesting. Maybe everybody can. But
is it something that I need to do?
No, I don't see her. Jess doesn't see her. Okay, they all see her, but we don't. That's really interesting. Well, I'm glad they can see you. I can picture her in my mind. It was just moments ago.
Oh yeah, of course.
Jess, are there more questions? Or
there are. We have one from Sarah Urich. Sarah, I apologize if I mispronounce your last name. I'm curious to hear you speak about the white supremacist patriarchal conditioning that exists within us and how we can work with this even while recognizing our inherent dignity and innate beauty. Just a simple question to.
I assume that's a white person asking that question.
That's Sarah Urich from Omega. Yes, and she is white.
So
and Sarah.
Uh-oh, there goes Jess.
I'm here. I just took my face off the screen.
Oh, okay.
I can't really fully answer that question. I feel like each one of us has to do our own interior work. And when we talk about white supremacy, what do we actually mean? And to recognize privilege is one thing, but white supremacy is basically a kind of disease that has a very, very long history. And the curriculum now is realizing that disease and actually diagnosing it, and then finding ways to inhabit your own fullness without privileging it in relationship to anybody else. That's a lifetime's work. But it seems to me that awareness allows us a whole other dimension, as I was saying, an orthogonal dimension for actually embracing what we most don't want to look at, whatever it is in our own minds and in our own behavior. And then that awareness can actually show us. It's not even a matter of showing us. It's actually liberative right in that moment, because it reveals that our narratives about self and other are just that. They're fictions that are totally imprisoning, but they're like soap bubbles too. They can go poof if you touch them in a moment, and you realize that you've been carrying around the delusion your entire life. But it's also a meditation practice, because it will keep coming up. It's a habit. It's an ingrained kind of way of being in relationship to the reality we were born into, perhaps. So it's an interior work, just like yoga, and we do it for life.
Uh-oh.
I hope that answers your question satisfactorily. It's a very big question.
It sure is. I think Jess has ducked out. Vivian, are you still here? John, I think
I am, and I wanted to try to come on my phone.
Oh yeah, it's not good. Oh, good. Jess is back. I think.
There you are.
Oh,
okay.
There she is.
Yeah, I just entered in on my phone. I went off my laptop.
You're
Very
so tech savvy.
Very
yeah.
enterprising.
I was thinking we were doing so well, and then I just got a little reminder that it will shut us off soon. But we're good.
Oh, it's going to shut us off?
Well, we have till I think 9 o'clock. I didn't realize they're 2-hour segments, but
we'll be good.
Yeah, just to be mindful of the time, because I don't want to have somebody cut off mid-sentence. But we're so glad to see you again, Vivian. Are there other questions, Jess, or do we want to do final thoughts? Or
I mean, really, the only remaining question is the one that I put in there. So
let's go for it. Let's go for it then.
It's very selfish. So I heard a talk you gave about acceptance, and I'm wondering how we rectify acceptance with an unjust world.
John, you've been doing this since the 1960s.
Okay, I mean, I'm willing to take a stab at it. Okay, because it's true that if you live in the meditative world, you'll hear a lot about acceptance. Okay, so to me, what acceptance means is very different from passive resignation. What acceptance means is actually recognizing things as they are, and you have to accept that, like, it's this way. Okay, it's painful, it's harmful, it's toxic, whatever it is. You recognize that. That doesn't mean you accept it in the sense that, like, you just let it continue like that. The conditions, whatever they are. So when we say in meditation or in yoga, you sort of accept things as they are, it means recognize things as they are, but it doesn't mean passively resign yourself to the way things are. It means just the opposite. It means find a way to be in wise relationship to toxicity, especially when it's coming out of yourself, especially when it lives inside yourself, especially when you notice that you too are capable of othering. You too are capable of dehumanizing thoughts about people who are mere abstraction. And so as we work on that kind of muscle, that is where the liberation comes in. That acceptance is the exact opposite of passive resignation. It's calling a spade. It's naming the actuality of things, and then questioning one's own motivation for anything, but especially for the meditation practice. And one's motivation, in some sense, at least I would say for myself, is to optimize well-being globally and minimize harm globally, but also locally. So just as they say, think globally, act locally, in the same way, we have all these big ideas about things, but we have to actually work at the interface of our own ignorance, our own greed, our own attachment, our own delusion, and our own narratives. Just the most toxic of all is our fictions that we tell ourselves that are not, including the fiction of American history, that are not true, and is certainly not true enough to what's called for in this moment.
Mm. Yeah.
What would you say, Vivian, about acceptance?
For me, I definitely know that acceptance is the beginning of peace within, because it stops the fight. And the resistance is, for me, what causes the greatest amount of suffering. And once there is the acceptance, then I feel like then there's the wave and there's the flow, and to be able to continue moving. And then the resistance is just a stuckness. And the acceptance also, for me, opens up possibility. And I'm always interested in possibility. This thing that's not finite, this thing that we can't put in a box and can't control, but that, again, I use it, that's larger than ourselves. Like, I really depend on something being larger than ourselves, because we clearly can see what we ourselves are doing to one another.
Yeah. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah. Things as they are. But that doesn't mean that we have to surrender to things as they are.
Well, I love how you described it earlier, where you said, something to the effect of, you accept it, but after we accept it, the healing isn't, oh, we accept it, but
Right.
But then once we do accept it, then there is there's this healing as kind of an indirect outcome that you can't create. And that's just something that I've experienced.
Yeah. And, radical acceptance, some people use that phrase. I mean, it really requires putting out the welcome mat for things as they are, which are very often unwanted, the last thing you'd want. A diagnosis of one kind or another, or hatred arising in a community. And this is like actually, it's a very radical act to accept it, in the sense of put out the welcome mat for it, not to praise it, but to actually engage with the toxicity for the sake of healing. And there's no one right way to do that. There are an infinite number of potential ways to do that, depending on the circumstances of the moment. And the healing is not going to come out of thought alone, or nice philosophies, or beautiful quotes from from our heroes. The real healing is going to come out of our own willingness to transform our own delusion into openness, into not knowing and being comfortable with not knowing everything, as opposed to, I know everything and this is the way it has to be for me. But once we recognize that that me is a tiny little element of a much larger you that you haven't paid any attention to your whole life, then in a sense, like, you have real healing and transformation. That can happen on the individual level, in a family, it can happen in a neighborhood, and can happen in a country or on the planet. And that's what I think, as Homo sapiens sapiens, we need to actually realize, in the sense of, like, the name Homo sapiens sapiens, that Latin for humanity, means the species that is aware, and is aware that it is aware. So that would be mindfulness times mindfulness. And we need to exercise that muscle a little bit before we get there on a species level. And the clock is ticking, and the planet is burning and flooding, and even the sort of structures that we've depended on for a certain kind of public safety are disintegrating, or even the nature of truth disintegrating in front of our very eyes, on social media and in the newspaper and in Congress and everywhere else. And so this is it. I mean, this is, like, as I was saying, all hands on deck on Spaceship Earth, but with awareness and with love in our hearts, just what Martin Luther King was talking about. But that love is tempered by wisdom. In fact, they're not different. But that's why we practice mindfulness, why we practice yoga, why we practice loving what is. It doesn't mean accepting it. It means recognizing it in a deep way, and then finding ways for it to heal and transform.
I love that idea of the mindfulness being a route to transform the delusion.
Yeah, starting with ourselves, of course, because it's so easy for everybody else. We can think, oh, they're all deluded, but me, I'm not.
Yeah, and that's really what the Racial Healing Hub, like our premise is, that rather than starting out on a global level or saying that I'm going out there to change the world, we do a lot of activities that inspire contemplation, reflection, a self-examination, because it has to begin with us.
Totally. It's the same with us in MBSR in the hospital. It's a group of people sitting around in a circle, and everybody's got something that they don't want, in the form of disease, in the form of a health-related problem. And in 8 weeks, the vast majority of people, through the practice, come out with exactly what they went in with, but holding it in an entirely different way. And very often you see symptoms transform, and you see attitudes transform, and you see another thing you see is a lot of love among people who were strangers before. So it's quite remarkable. And as I think, as we're moving into the last few minutes of our conversation, I think it's really important to perhaps just state explicitly that this is not something that a small number of people who are, like, into yoga or meditation can do. We're not talking about joining some other club. We're talking about recognizing the deep humanity that we all share in, and the no separation between self and other. And when we have a kind of visceral experience of that, by caring enough to keep reminding ourselves and rebodying ourselves, and I love to use rebodying as a kind of word that doesn't exist in English, but why not in terms of yoga, that we kind of continually renewing ourselves, so to speak, and grounding ourselves in the present moment and its infinite possibilities. And that's not delusion. That's not pie in the sky, idealism. That's ancient meditative wisdom that is a signature, I would say, a signature offering from the past to the present to, in some sense, ensure a livable future for us as human beings, as Homo sapiens sapiens. There's only one race,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the human race.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I want that to just land with us. I want that to reverberate. And I ask you to just indulge me, Jon, in letting me just like leave us with a quote from you that I would like to just be able to have
I surrender.
some vibrational frequency and reverberation, because it really just sums it up. By the words of Mr. Jon Kabat-Zinn, why not connect with others who care in the way that you care, and find new and imaginative ways to be in wiser relationship to our moments and to our opportunities to be of service to others and to ourselves, to transform society and to establish not merely non-harming as a guiding principle in all of our relationships, as in the Hippocratic Oath in medicine when it is lived up to, but also taking steps to heal the wounds of our social fabric, the wounds of racism, inequity, injustice, and poverty as best we can. I just wanted that to hang there for a little bit.
Listen, that silence was a beautiful meditation. And to just say, I guess, on my part, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be in conversation with you like this, and have the privilege of, being hosted in this way by Robin and the whole team, Jess. And what an honor it is to be with, this community online. And I hope that, just like everything we do when we teach, it's like throwing a little pebble into a pond and the ripples go out. They don't just go out because it's not a pond. So they go out in 4 dimensions at least into the world. And so I hope that everybody that's been on this platform with us now or come to it later actually use it as an opportunity to remember what they most love, and then bring it into the world in every way that they feel moved to, for the sake of all beings and future generations, as the native peoples always remind us to include.
I am I can't think of a better way to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King's day and life and the National Day of Racial Healing than being in this conversation that, as you said, that I hope will be able to be water and flow as it needs to.
Mm.
So we should let Robin say goodbye to,
And take us out.
yeah.
Play us out. This was just, I am so thankful that we got to do this. Moved, overwhelmed, grounded, here. So many things to think about. And we've appreciated reading all of the wonderful comments, and I know there will be more to come, and people can watch this later. If you came in late, you can go to the beginning and watch it again. I think it's the kind of presentation conversation that you get different things from, like we always do at different times of listening. It's just, I knew this would be my favorite event, and it was. You too. That was just, people asked me, was there practice? Did you go over it was such a natural conversation, and that's the beauty of just being in that same space, though virtual. So I can't thank you both enough, and to my dear friend Liz for bringing us all together initially, which is amazing, really, how this all came together. So thank you all, and good night. And I don't know where Jess is. Thank you to Jess for
Jess, thank you, and for everything you said. And
there she is.
And with so much heart. It was very touching.
Yeah.
Happy to be with all of you.
I hate goodbyes. How do we end this?
It's I just want to linger. And...
Oh yeah.
I'm the last one out as everybody's putting the cups away. I will let you two.
Well, Vivian, we should catch up at some point. Probably not tonight, but let's just have a Zoom call or something to just check in and see how we felt about it. And
sure.
And good night to all of you out there, and till now, this moment, just leading to the next moment. Enjoy the adventure.
Peace and blessings.
Good night, everybody. Thank you. Good night. Thank you.